The idyllic villages that cling to our coastline. Known for their beauty and serenity.
Wow, look at this, just incredible.
Now destinations for our leisure. This is like exploring a jungle. But once they played a vital role in our history.
That's got to be the Lost Village. I'm Ben Robinson, and as an archaeologist, I'm fascinated by coastal villages. I love to explore them, discover their histories, and unearth often surprising stories about their past.
I've come to Beer, a picturesque village on Devon's coast. It's 20 miles from the city of Exeter and is nestled in the chalky white cliffs of Lyme Bay.
Since Roman times, quarries around this small, somewhat remote village have produced a stone that's helped build some of our most iconic buildings.
We have a sales receipt from the 12th century for the purchase of 48 blocks of stone, which was used in the Tower of London.
I'll uncover how this valuable stone made the village what it is today.
I'm just admiring your building here. It's striking frontage. It's wonderful.
Stunning, isn't it?
And discover the role the villagers played in one of our nation's biggest royal events.
The most famous piece of Honiton lace is Queen Victoria's wedding lace, made here in Beer.
There's a fascinating story to this village by the sea. The story of the village of Beer is the story of its location right here on the coast, and also the very rock that it sits on. And it was the quality of this bedrock that meant that Beer stone was valued throughout the land.
I'm here to find out how this shaped the village and the people that lived and worked here. Beer's name comes from the Old English word bearu, meaning grove or small wooded area. It has a long history as a fishing village, and you can still find clues to that past.
Just approaching the village now, and I can see it's all based on this winding street that comes down the valley here. Now, this valley would have been carved out by a river way back in prehistoric times, and there's a remnant of that river behind me here. It's a little stream in a conduit, and it runs right out into the sea.
Before the channel was built, this brook flowed freely down the main street and was used by locals to clean fish and wash the guts back out to sea.
I'm just getting a first impression of some of the buildings here, and this one's caught my eye. It looks for all the world like a little Tudor manor house. Look at that flattened four-centre arch over the doorway there, and the drip mould over those mullioned windows, very Tudor. But look at the date stone, 1894. This is the Victorians mimicking an earlier age. However, next door there is an older property. That thatched cottage there could be talking 1700s, we could be talking a little bit earlier than that maybe. There's a real mix going on here.
The variety of houses here shows that this village has had wealth and growth at different times. And one of Beer's more lucrative trades throughout the years has been the quarrying and export of Beer stone.
It's a nice terrace of cottages here that look much earlier than the Victorian period. They've been modernised, but I can see in the walling there, you've got the hard dark grey flint, which is found in the cliffs. But you've got another kind of stone as well, beer stone. It weathers to a nice silvery colour, and when it's fresher, it's a more creamy colour. And you can see it's been used in those shaped blocks around the window surrounds and in the coins on the corner of the buildings there. Well, this is a really striking building. That flint has been knapped into blocks, and then the beer stone has been shaped into square blocks as well, and it's made a wonderful checkerboard pattern.
Local shopkeeper Woozy has been trading here for more than 20 years.
Just admiring your building here. It's striking frontage. It's wonderful.
Stunning, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I'm guessing way back in history, this was called something like Chequers House or Chequers Cottage.
Actually, Diamond House.
Diamond House. Oh, that's because of the tablets there on the wall in the
Yeah,
diamond
that's
shape.
right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Quite fantastic, the way that they can manipulate and get the stone to look like it does.
The local beer stone has clearly been used all over the village. But to understand why this material is unique means going back around 100 million years.
Just walked along the pebbly beach here at Beer, and I'm looking back towards Seaton, and I can see the cliffs there are very red in colour, but right in front of me, they're very, very white.
In fact, Beer is the only outcrop on the south coast of Devon where this chalk formation is exposed. The rest is older red sandstone and mud.
And I can see here the chalk varies. In places it's kind of crumbly, it seems to me. In other bands it seems more compact, more fine-grained.
Geologist Dr. Jodie Fisher has studied why this part of the Devon coastline is so special.
Jodie, you've brought me to this very specific spot.
It's a fantastic place to have a look at the rocks, and it really shows us the geology that you can see here at Beer and what has made Beer the village that it is. So we can see right in front of us the fantastic white cliffs of chalk. So the chalk would have formed during the Cretaceous, which is a time of great warmth. The seas were a lot warmer, the world was a lot warmer, and that caused a huge amount of flooding across the world. The chalks themselves are formed in these shallow continental seas, made up of phytoplankton called coccoliths.
These are part animal organisms, but very, very simple animal organisms.
Very, very simple, and they were balls made up of lots of little plates. They then would, when they died, fall to the sea floor, and those plates would fall apart. And they make up the main constituent of these chalks that we see here. So chalk is very soft, it's very crumbly. You wouldn't want to be building buildings with this. But the beer stone isn't like that. Yeah. You can see just how much more solid it is.
And why is that?
This is down to this fossil here. This is called an Inoceremus, and it is a type of bivalve. So similar to some of the bivalves we find on the beach today, cockles and mussels, it would have had two shells. Yeah. And what I love about the Inoceremus that makes it quite unique is its shell is made up of small little prisms. And these prisms fall all haphazardly in different orientations, which makes our beer stone fantastic to sculpt. It can be cut and carved in any plane. It doesn't fall apart along specific seams like we see in other
so it's not
of
like
rock.
strongly bedded where you have to split it that way. You can't work it that way because it would just fracture. Because it's so jumbled up, you can cut it really any way you want within reason.
Exactly that, which makes it an absolutely fantastic building stone. It's all down to these guys that we see here.
And I just think it's incredible that small creatures that were here millions of years ago have shaped this coastline, but also the village here. The lifestyle, the industry, so many things are shaped by the geology that we inherit.
That's it. Geology underlies it all.
The beer stone is a valuable seam deep within the landscape. And this rich source of building material has a long history of being put to good use.
I'm about a mile west of the village, and for around 2,000 years people have been quarrying and tunnelling into the hillside, extracting beer stone, and they've created a whole network of caves and tunnels that I'm about to explore.
Stephen Rogers is the managing director of 40 acres of the Beerstone Caves.
Steve, this is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, it's cavernous, isn't it? I didn't expect it to be this huge in here.
It is pretty jaw-dropping. We believe that it could be one of the longest predominantly mined sites in the UK. We believe the Romans arrived sometime at middle of the 1st century, and it would have had pretty much constant mining right the way through to the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century. Romans traditionally were quite good geologists. They recognised the seam of stone, probably clocked it in the White Cliffs.
So the Romans have latched on to something here, the quality of the stone, but they're tunnelling into the hillside to get to it. They can't get at it from above.
Initially, they would have started a quarry, an open cast quarry, and when that quarry became too much to remove the stuff they didn't want above it, that's when they would have dipped underground and started the mine.
But what evidence have you got that it was actually Romans? Because it's pretty difficult to date.
Well, Romans are quite famous for their pillars and arches. Yeah, and you can see that here, all these kind of arches and pillars supporting the ceiling. Other than that, many Roman bronze 1st century coins and fibular brooches have been found too.
These caves are a warren of tunnels created over the course of 2,000 years. After the Romans, there's evidence of the Normans quarrying at Beer. Their time in the mines is characterised by rectangular and squared-off column tops. The Normans kicked off a massive medieval building drive, constructing castles, churches and cathedrals up and down the country, which stamped their authority on the landscape and proclaimed their dedication to Christianity. Never was Beerstone more in demand.
This stone is perfect for building, specifically carvings within building, church windows, doorways, gargoyles, that sort of stuff like, you know. And when it's fresh and it's kept below ground, talking to local masons who describe working Beerstone, it's like cutting butter with a hot knife. But once you take Beerstone out of the mine, it slightly changes colour from that nice white to a more goldy cream colour, and it hardens tenfold once it's cured and weathered.
Beerstone was used in some of the country's most iconic medieval buildings, from the intricate vaulted ceilings of Exeter Cathedral to the breathtaking cloisters and nave in Westminster Abbey, and even Old London Bridge.
We have a sales receipt from the 12th century for the purchase of 48 blocks of stone, which was quarried from this mine and was used in the central tower of the Tower of London. Now, you might be thinking, why did they just use 48 blocks? Because actually, that's not a lot of stone. Well, we've worked out the tonnage from the dimensions and the weight, and it's about the right weight which an old wooden sailing vessel from the 12th century would have carried. So we're pretty confident to say the stone which is in the central tower of the Tower of London was pulled from here, taken to the beach, sailed up the coast and up the Thames.
Wow, that's just fantastic. So this is people appreciating the qualities from the Roman period all the way through to the medieval period and beyond.
And beyond, absolutely.
By the 1500s, the medieval building drive was over, and the Beerstone mine fell quiet. But the villagers soon found another use for these empty underground caves.
This is a part of the mine known as the chapel, and it's a very distinctive space. There are these big raking pillars here. The door that I walked through is like an arch, and there's these little niches here cut into the rock. The cross there is a bit later, but it's a representation of the fact that at times of persecution in the 16th century, 17th century, you couldn't have Catholic Mass out in the open. It was forbidden. So the story is that they would come down here, and this place was specially reserved, built for them to hold Catholic Masses out of sight. Although the Beerstone mines went in and out of favour over time, they flourished at certain times in history, they were quieter in others. It's obvious that in the 19th century, in that Victorian period, they're using a lot of Beerstone again. You can see it as rubble in the wall of these buildings here. I'm pretty sure that underneath the white paint there, that's Beerstone too.
In the Victorian period, there's a building boom here. In fact, about half of the homes in the village were built or extended at that time as the population grew.
And something of the scale of that rebuilding programme and its impact on the old village is captured here by a Victorian diarist, Peter Orlando Hutchinson, in 1872. He says, of late years, many new houses have been built so that the ancient quaintness of the place is lessened. That's an interesting statement. And I think it disguises the fact that what to him was quaintness was actually conditions that might have been pretty appalling for the people who were living here. There was a real crisis in housing in 19th century England, and people in rural circumstances in villages like this were living often in abject poverty. Victorian society began to find this totally unacceptable, and up and down the country, villages were virtually rebuilt by landlords. And this wasn't just a philanthropic exercise. People were leaving the countryside for a better life in the towns. And if you wanted to keep your workforce here, you had to build them better houses. And of course, what they used was Beerstone and the local flint. Look at this lovely terrace of cottages. Step down the hillside, all the same design, all built at the same time, Victorian era, perhaps by the lord of the manor, someone who had the ability for a building programme like this, sweeping away older, more dilapidated cottages. And they're all dressed beautifully with that soft red brick, charming place, and they've got wonderful sea views as well.
The village revamp meant the Beerstone quarry was busy once again, but there was something else which would see it thrive. By the mid-1800s, many places of worship were overcrowded or run down. So the Victorians refurbished or rebuilt around 80% of Church of England churches and cathedrals.
And this new wave of building was happening right here in Beer too. This is the Church of St Michael, right in the heart of the village. And it's built of that wonderful creamy Beerstone. And although the architecture looks medieval, the pilasters, those half columns there, it's not medieval. This is the Victorians reviving the Gothic architecture to create this.
There was renewed interest in the earlier medieval Gothic style. Prominent buildings in need of repair were demolished and reconstructed in what the Victorians considered an homage to this period, using steeply pitched roofs, pointed arches, stained glass, and intricate stone carvings.
Now, this church is really the Victorians telling us what medieval builders should have built. They thought, we can do it much, much better than they did in medieval times, but they're deliberately referencing those times. It speaks to old England, it speaks to tradition, and they're trying to root something back into the medieval past and give it an integrity and authority. You're supposed to come in and feel yourself as part of a long church history.
This church was built in 1877 and was funded by the Lord of the Manor, the Honourable Mark Roll. Penny Grant is one of the church wardens here.
Penny, this is a marvellous church, and the thing that surprises me about it is outside it looks quite compact, but when you get inside, it's TARDIS-like.
Sometimes you think of it as more of a cathedral than a village church. All of the stone is obviously from Beer Quarry, and the pillars, that is Devon marble.
Somehow it's so much more meaningful if the stone and the fabric of the building comes from the locality.
It was designed by John Hayward, who studied under Barry.
Oh, well, the big architect of the time, really. I mean, Barry is Houses of Parliament and
That's big.
Gothic revival.
Originally, it must have cost around about £7,000 or £8,000 all those years ago.
A lot of money in those days.
A lot of money in those days.
No expense
Yes,
spared.
Yeah.
I mean, remarkable architecturally. It's harking back to that earlier time, the tradition of English architecture, just to make that connection with the past, really. And this building is certainly doing that. Tablets often record who the prominent people were, the movers and shakers. There's a tablet there to the founders, the lords of the manor, the rolls right there. But I've just spotted this. Almost unbelievably, this is the building before this church was built here. And there's nothing recognisable from what I see now today. To be honest, this doesn't even look like it was a church originally. It almost looks like a building that's been rebuilt.
Wasito anato, wasi mahikita, wasi kamihika, ini makikuka, mise malenika, watashi ga nato, imasi kapisha, osi wa dikito.
As a church. Now, I love this as an archaeologist. It is absolutely fascinating. But to Victorian architects that are trying to recreate the Gothic better than medieval people could do it, this must have seemed like almost an abomination. I can almost see, in a way, why they invested so heavily in creating this new church. While the stone industry was enjoying a renaissance in Victorian times and the village was flourishing with the new wealth that this was generating, there was another local industry that was about to be thrown into the spotlight by Queen Victoria herself. And that was English lace making. It's believed to have started in Devon's coastal villages in the 1500s with the arrival of French and Flemish Protestants fleeing persecution from the Catholic Church. They brought with them their lace-making skills. Lace expert Carol McFadzean has studied how the craft industry grew here in Beer. Do we have any real sense of how the lace was actually made here? I mean, was it several families in workshops, or was it individuals?
It was individuals working in their own homes. It was a true cottage industry. The style of lace that was made here is called Honiton lace.
Honiton, that's a place down the road.
Yes, although it should be East Devon lace because it was made in the whole area. But Honiton lace, as it was called, was very similar to the Brussels lace that was made on the continent, where it was made in pieces, or what were called as sprigs, little designs. It wasn't a continuous lace where it was made by the yard. I do have a box here, which is from Mrs. Allen, who ran the lace shop in Beer from the late 1900s to early 20th century. And in there,
Oh, wow.
a small neck decoration, which would have been made by several lace makers, because to produce a solid square inch of Honiton lace will take between 8 to 10 hours.
That's incredible.
Yes. But the most famous piece of Honiton lace is Queen Victoria's wedding lace, made here in Beer.
In the mid-1800s, the British handmade lace industry was struggling. It became cheaper to bring in imports from France and Belgium. So in a bid to revive this craft, Queen Victoria commissioned the lace makers to make swathes of lace, and she would use this to decorate an outfit seen by millions, her wedding dress. This included a wide strip of lace sewn to the bottom of the skirt, the flounce, and a round collar called a bertha.
The lace was ordered from Jane Bidney, who was born in Beer, but she had her lace business in London, and she was the first royal appointment to the new Queen Victoria for Honiton lace. Victoria ordered the lace flounce in March 1839, at which point she wasn't engaged to Albert. The lace flounce was completed in November 1839, a month after Albert and Victoria got engaged. So when the flounce arrived, she decided to have it put on the dress that she was having made. And then the order for the sleeve frills, the bertha, and for the veil came back to Beer, and they had 6 weeks in which to produce all of that to match the flounce. She was actually so delighted with it that on the day of the wedding, she sent £10 through Jane Bidney down to the lace makers in Beer to have a party, and Jane Bidney was invited to the wedding.
That's amazing.
This wedding lace gave a real boost to the whole trade of making Honiton lace, and she wore it on every royal occasion, every royal wedding.
So she certainly treasured the lace
certainly
made
did.
here in Beer.
Yes, she did.
Yeah. Just walking down the village street here, and it's amazing to think that people living in these cottages were responsible for making the lace in Queen Victoria's wedding dress. You can imagine them beavering away there, trying to get finished on time.
Craft Cottage is a former craft shop where it's believed that some of that famous lace was made. Owner Julie Young has invited me to take a glimpse inside.
Oh, wonderful fireplace.
That was reputed to be from one of the old ships. The house is alleged to have been built by wealthy Dutch mariners. I believe it was part of the ship's keel.
Oh, OK, yeah.
And if you look closely, you can see initials. There's the letters AB
Oh, yes, there
inscribed.
we go. Yeah. Lovely stone surround to the fireplace, Beer stone. I notice you've got some finds out.
Yes, so my brother renovated most of the house for us, step by step. And when he did the top floor, he lifted all the floorboards up, and his knees will testify to the fact that there were thousands and thousands of old lace-maker needles that punctured him like on the leg, so he wasn't happy. But he did find these little treasures. It was lovely to find because we'd heard, there's lots of stories about the house, because obviously it's of a certain age, but we'd never actually had proper evidence before that it was used for lace making. So we've got 2 bobbins.
Still got the thread on, this one.
Yeah, really fine thread.
And made of wood.
And also a thimble.
But this,
That's the real treasure.
oh, that's extraordinary.
I believe it's a lace maker's needle.
So that really, really indicates that lace making was going on in this building.
In this building on the top floor.
Wow, absolutely incredible. It's such a connection to the past, isn't it? And somehow if you can physically touch these things, there's nothing like it somehow connects you with those people and
does,
those
it does.
days. Yeah, amazing.
By 1900, mechanical innovations meant that the handmade lace industry had all but disappeared. And the village's most valuable commodity, its stone, became less popular.
Despite the Victorian revival of Beer stone, in the 20th century was the age of brick, of steel, of concrete. The need for intricate stone carving just dwindled. Beer is still somewhere where tourists love to come. It's beautiful. But for me, this place will always be remembered for the contribution it's made to some of our most important buildings, and through lace making, the connection to one of the most famous monarchs.